Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the sources you send us, and well, we try to get right to the heart of them. Today we're digging into a really fascinating piece from Tablet Magazine. It's by Edward N. Lutwak, published April 15th, 2025.
And the title definitely grabs you.
It does. How Bibi Buggered on to Victory. And the subtitle adds more. Through sheer tenacity, the Israeli Prime Minister fended off unremitting pressure from Washington and reshaped the regional map. But his most critical test still lies ahead.
It sets a strong tone right from the start. Lutwak's central idea, it really focuses on this quality of tenacity, willpower.
Not just strategy or tech.
Exactly. He argues that in big wars, victory often comes down to the leader just refusing to quit. Sheer determination to keep going, even when things look, well, pretty bleak.
Okay, so tenacity is the key word here. And Lutwak starts with a big historical example, doesn't he? Churchill in 1940.
He does. It's a powerful parallel. Think about it. 1940, Western Europe had fallen. Germany looked unstoppable.
Britain was completely isolated.
Totally. And the U.S., was still very much in an isolationist mood, despite Britain needing help desperately.
Hitler even offered a deal, right? To leave the empire alone.
Yes. And faced with all this, Churchill, well, he didn't have some grand secret plan laid out.
What did he say?
Famously, he admitted he just planned to keep buggering on. That phrase really sticks.
Wow. Just keep going no matter what.
That's the essence Lutwak captures. And the pressure on Churchill didn't let up. It arguably got worse.
How so?
Well, Germany invaded Russia initially looked like another quick win. U.S. isolationists felt vindicated. Churchill faced criticism at home, people saying he lacked strategy.
And Rommel in North Africa.
Rommel was having success, absolutely. Right. Plus, Germany was rolling out advanced tech, the jet fighter, the Fritz X-second bomb, the Tiger tank. Scary stuff.
And Lutwak points out that even with Britain needing better planes, the U.S. Congress wouldn't fund the P-51 Mustang.
That's right. Developed with dwindling British funds initially, isolationism was still a major hurdle in the U.S.
Yet Churchill's response remained the same.
According to Lutwak, yes. Just keep buggering on. That unwavering resolve, even without a clear path forward, is what Lutwak sees as critical leadership.
Okay, so that sets the stage for the comparison to Netanyahu.
Exactly. Lutwak draws a very direct line. He notes Netanyahu's known admiration for Churchill. There's the portrait in his office, the shared taste for cigars, cognac.
Right, the infamous gifted cognac.
Yes, that detail's in there. But the core parallel Lutwak emphasizes is dealing with Washington during wartime.
But he notes a key difference in their situations with the U.S.
He does. Churchill had a resistant Congress, but a generally sympathetic president in FDR. Lutwak argues Netanyahu faced the opposite support on Capitol Hill, but an administration in Washington actively trying to weaken him.
Actively trying to weaken him. That sounds intense, especially during a war. Lutwak really details this pressure, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He lays it out piece by piece. He talks about key U.S. officials apparently encouraging Netanyahu's domestic opponents trying to constrain his actions during the war that started in October 2023.
He mentions specific groups or influences.
Yeah, he points to what he calls Obama leftovers in the Biden administration, naming people like Samantha Power and Robert Malley. He even brings up Malley's family background regarding Israel.
Okay.
Lutwak also suggests the CIA was generally hostile, Pentagon support was limited, and that there were deliberate U.S. efforts to slow down weapons supplies mid-war.
Delays on weapons. That's a serious claim in wartime.
It's a very serious claim, and central to Lutwak's argument about the sheer weight of pressure Netanyahu was under. He describes it almost like a coordinated campaign from Washington, involving Israeli NGOs and political rivals.
And pressure wasn't just from Washington, was it?
No, not at all. Lutwak highlights calls for a ceasefire coming from all directions, well-educated Israelis, American Jews, European governments, a constant barrage demanding Israel stop.
Even from within the Israeli security establishment, retired generals.
Precisely. He names figures like Yair Golan, Israel Ziv, Amos Gilead, noting Gilead was apparently well-regarded in U.S. circles, partly because he opposed Netanyahu.
And what was their stance?
They were pushing for a ceasefire, Lutwak says, but without securing the release of hostages or ensuring Hamas was disarmed.
Right.
Basically, let Hamas survive.
That's quite a position for former generals to take, as Lutwak presents it. What about the North, Hezbollah?
Another huge pressure point. After October 7th, Hezbollah's rocket fire was a constant threat to northern Israel, critical infrastructure. And Lutwak stresses the Biden administration strongly opposed any preemptive Israeli action against them.
For how long?
For a whole year, he reports. He even includes that very blunt quote attributed to Biden when Nasrallah was eventually taken out. Something like, Bibi, what the F?
Wow.
Yeah.
And then there were the Houthis in Yemen, too.
Yes, another layer. Litwack characterizes the initial U.S. approach as hands-off, letting Iran's proxies disrupt Red Sea shipping.
Which impacted Israel directly.
Yeah, hitting a key secondary port for Israel, but also, importantly, it fueled those international calls for a Gaza ceasefire. Look, the ships are being attacked. You need to stop the war in Gaza.
And the European response in the Red Sea.
Litwack describes it as limited, almost symbolic, reinforcing Israel's view that, well, countries like France, Italy, Spain couldn't really be relied on in a pinch. The UK and US did take some action eventually, but Litwack implies it wasn't decisive early on.
So you've got pressure from Washington, allies, domestic opponents, retired generals, Hezbollah, the Houthis. It's an incredible amount of pressure.
It really is. And this is where Litwack brings it back to tenacity. He argues it was Netanyahu's pure resolve, just refusing to buckle under all of that allowed Israel to shift the whole situation.
Turn the tables, essentially.
That's exactly Litwack's framing. That sheer willpower, that refusal to yield, enabled Israel to dramatically change the geopolitical map in the second half of 2024.
And the centerpiece of that shift, according to Litwack, was dealing with Hezbollah.
Yes. He calls it an awe-inspiring three-part takedown. Truly remarkable stuff by Mossad and the IDF.
Can you walk us through that, the pagers?
Right. It started with exploding pagers carried by Hezbollah members, then moved to booby-trapped radios delivered as replacements, and culminated in this incredibly precise strike that eliminated senior commanders, including Nasrallah himself.
And that effectively crippled the organization.
Litwack argues yes. Because Nasrallah's control was so centralized, his death basically shut Hezbollah down, neutralizing its massive arsenal. He notes the Biden administration did eventually impose a ceasefire in Lebanon, but the game was already over by then.
A decisive outcome. And Litwack says this had knock-on effects.
Huge ones. With Hezbollah dismantled, Assad's regime in Syria, which leaned heavily on Hezbollah and Iran, became extremely fragile.
Leading to its fall.
Exactly. It collapsed in early December 2024. And Litwack connects the dots. Syria falls. The IDF controls the Gaza-Egypt border. Suddenly, Iran loses its land bridge.
Its ability to resupply Hezbollah and Hamas.
Precisely. Cutting off that supply line, Litwack asserts, represents Israel's biggest strategic victory since 1949. A massive shift.
He credits Israeli tech and military skill, too, of course.
Oh, absolutely. He acknowledges Israel's technical brilliance, the IDF's spirit. But his core point remains. None of that could have been fully leveraged, none of those victories achieved, without Netanyahu's tenacity in weathering the political storm.
The will to see it through despite the pressure.
That's the crux of it. The political will, the keep buggering on factor, was indispensable in Litwack's view.
But the article's subtitle has that warning. His most critical test still lies ahead. Where does Litwack point then?
Iran's nuclear program. That's the ultimate challenge remaining.
Okay. What's the situation there, according to Litwack?
Well, he mentions the Houthis are now being dealt with more seriously by the U.S., but Iran's push for nukes is the big one. Litwack notes Israel took out Iran's air defenses back in October 2024.
Creating an opportunity.
Potentially. A window for strikes on nuclear sites, especially once Israel gets new air refueling tankers it needs. But Litwack is clear, Israel's bombing capacity isn't the same as the U.S. heavy bombers, meaning any Israeli strike would need incredible precision. The margin for error is tiny, and the risk of failure letting Iran actually get a bomb is, well, unacceptable.
So, facing that ultimate threat, Litwack's conclusion is...
Back to Churchill. Back to tenacity.
Yeah.
He essentially says Netanyahu has no other option. He has to find that resolve again. He has to keep buggering on against this final critical test.
It really comes full circle. So, if we boil down Litwack's argument from this tablet piece, it's that in these huge conflicts, a leader's sheer stubborn willpower can actually be the deciding factor, more than just smart plans or fancy weapons.
Right. He uses Churchill as the classic example and then presents Netanyahu's recent experience weathering all that immense pressure as a modern case study.
Showing how that resolve, that tenacity, led directly to major strategic wins for Israel, changing the regional map.
Exactly. Litwack really emphasizes that Netanyahu's ability to withstand the pressure, especially from the U.S. administration he describes as hostile, plus all the other groups, that it was absolutely key to neutralizing Hezbollah in the subsequent fall of Assad.
The buggering on was crucial.
In Luttwak's analysis, yes. It was the essential ingredient that allowed Israel's military and technical strengths to achieve those results.
It definitely leaves you thinking. Considering Luttwak's focus on tenacity and looking at the world today, what does this imply for leadership in future conflicts?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Is sheer determination the main thing leaders need when facing these huge threats? Or is there a risk there, too? Needs balance, maybe.
It's a fundamental question. Luttwak makes a powerful case for tenacity using these examples. But, how does that relentless focus play out long term? Especially in a world that's so interconnected, does it always lead to the best outcomes?
Yeah.
Or does flexibility, diplomacy maybe need equal weight? It's something to really ponder.
Definitely food for thought. Well, we've been diving deep into Edward N. Luttwak's article, How Bibi Buggered Onto Victory, from Tablet Magazine, April 15th, 2025.
A really provocative piece.
It is. We encourage everyone to check out the full article and maybe more of Luttwak's work. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.